Mr. Prothridge?
Here.
Mr. Bracken?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Franklin?
Here.
Ms. French?
Here.
Vice Mayor Ragu?
Here. And if you would like to, we can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So we'll move on to public participation. Anyone wishing to address council about items not on the agenda or on the consent agenda, please come forward at this time and state your name and address for the record. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes. I'll give you a warning when you're about at a minute and then cut you off at 5 minutes. This is the public's opportunity to address council and staff. This is not a question and answer session. We are here to listen to your comments only. If you intend to comment on the arrest video at 36 East High Street, we welcome your comments because we know this incident is something we'll be talking about as a community. Seeing no public comments, may we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any items to be removed? All in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Okay, we can move on to the resolutions.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Habitat for Humanity of Greater Cincinnati for the construction of housing to serve individuals and families at or below 80% of the area median income on 601, 603, and 607 West Chestnut Street.
Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
And Jessica?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. As you know, at our last meeting, we had a work session to review the request for proposal respondents, all three, and kind of went through it at a high level. And at the end of that meeting, we kind of thought we were going to start working with the YWCA. But after that meeting, when they heard some hesitation about expediting the process and going through the full plan development process, they wrote and said, we're withdrawing. We just can't go through the expedited, we can't do this without an expedited process. And so with that, I met with the Housing Advisory Commission to say, well, I'd like your guidance on what your thoughts are and how we should proceed. And after a lot of discussion, they felt that we should move to the second highest scoring proposal, which was Habitat for Humanity. I did invite Habitat for Humanity to come this evening, but he does regret he had a kind of an emergency where he couldn't get here this evening, but he sends his regrets. I did speak with him on the phone. Their team would be very excited to work with us. And if you remember, they were proposing up to 38 townhome units that had a basement, and then they were 2-story, and they would be 3 and 4 bedroom in blocks of 4 and 8 townhomes. It would be a planned development process. I imagine there would end up being a little bit of wiggle room. It might be, I would say, at the end of the day, somewhere between 30 and 38 units on that land. Their project would be built in phases, not all at once. But the more money they can receive through infrastructure assistance or my next resolution through grants would then speed up the process for the construction of those townhomes. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any public comments? Seeing none. Council discussion?
Jessica, can you just clarify? So the YWCA, it was either expedited process or nothing. They weren't willing to wait a year?
So I also wrote, and I did say, like, well, do you want to wait a year and try again? Like, I wanted to be really clear. And they said, bless and release the property for another development. So I said, okay. And they did say they hope to work with Oxford in the future in the right location, but they didn't want to hold on to the spot.
Can you remind me of how the land would be handled with Habitat? Do we maintain that ownership, or does Habitat maintain
Their
ownership?
preference would be to own the land because these are homes that are then purchased by the end user to build equity and stuff like that. But what's great about the Habitat model is it is an affordable, it's deed restricted to be affordable into the future for 20 years. And so some of those concerns that we had are built into the model of their program. But that is one of the things we would need to explore. So this is just to begin the conversation of developing an agreement with Habitat, and then we could start from there.
But how we, let's say, dispose of the land is also an issue that you would vote on.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I think in hearing folks as they talk about their concerns with that property and how it's going to be used, one of the things that keeps coming up, I won't say it's a super accurate comparison, but that comparison to Parkview Arms. And so we have to explain that, we don't have the relationship with the management company of Parkview Arms that we would have with Habitat. So even if we didn't maintain ownership of that property, being able to have those assurances for neighborhood members or community members that we would be very active and hands-on and expect Habitat to be very active and hands-on, I think could go a long way in building some of that trust.
I did, just build upon that comment, I did ask some questions of them because they had proposed like a playground and some green space, and I said, this is lovely, but who's gonna care for it? And they would have a homeowners association built into the mortgage of the people there, and then to care for some of the property and things like that.
And to follow up on what Alex said, I completely agree. And just like, because you've been a great champion about community land trust, that is something that we could definitely talk about. But, and then even if that family or the individual purchases the house, the land is still owned by the community land trust. And it's also nice because the purchase price is lower too, right? Because they're not buying the land, they're just buying the house.
I mean, I agree, but it's also gonna be like what they can work with us, and so we can still express our preference to do a ground lease, but if they need to buy it, like, they may need to for their funding structure and things like that, so I can bring that forward to you.
Because, I mean, at the MLK Junior Day that just happened, Ann Bailey was talking about, and I completely agreed with her, talking about, we have this community owned affordable housing in perpetuity. Don't know if I said that word right, but that I agree, because the concern is, okay, what happens after a generation or two? What is going to happen to that land? And I don't want that to be gone. And then the other question I would have is, and I'm sure this is a typical Habitat policy, but Habitat, if the owner is ready to sell their home before their mortgage is paid off, does the Habitat retain the right to buy back the home? That way, the homeowner has a willing buyer and that kind of thing. I'm assuming that is part of all Habitat homes.
It's deed restricted for affordability into the future, so yes, like, they have a whole structure. I can't speak to it in detail, but I do know that affordability into the future is a part of their model, that Habitat maintains some involvement, if you will. Yeah. And I could get more details for you. I know it at a very high level.
Yeah, my understanding is their structure for this is to maintain a price below market value to keep it affordable indefinitely. So every time it's sold, that carries on with the next lease. It's similar to what we were trying to do in the Housing Advisory Commission, modeling after Yellow Spring and other places that maintain affordable housing indefinitely. So I'm totally for that aspect of it.
So here's just a question about the scope of the agreement. All this resolution says is we can enter into an agreement, but to build the housing, but what would be the scope of that agreement? Is it, are there things to be thinking about in terms of I'm assuming Habitat for Humanity has certain terms by which its business model works, and this is what they do and they don't do, but do we anticipate what that agreement would specify?
Well, I think that's what we need to do.
Criteria we
didn't
would
want to
have?
begin this conversation without your permission to begin it. So I
Okay.
do think we will, after tonight, if you're like, sure, go ahead and explore it, we will start to develop a formal agreement with Habitat for Humanity for the development of this property and come back to you and say, okay, this is the agreement we've modeled, let's go or no go, and then that's my intention.
Yeah, and I think, even though it's written aside, we're sort of under the gun to do these things, but we wrote it such that I can enter into an agreement, but as Jessica said, I think I would prefer to bring that agreement back to have council vote on it, because, you know, early on, I wanted to be able to own the land, but it doesn't seem to fit Habitat's model. But, you know, maybe we can do that. So I think the specifics, I would like to come back and not enter into an agreement. This might be enter into negotiations so that we can bring back an agreement. So with that understanding, I believe we'll bring that agreement back to you to vote on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be great, because, for example, I'm looking at Ms. Brandstrader and Jason talked about this, about some of the sustainability dimensions of a development can help the affordability and the equity. Like, you know, is that something we seek in an agreement? You know, because remind me, if this was which one of the applicants was willing to just pay us off for the land? Was it?
It was Christo.
It was Christo, it was not Habitat for Humanity. Okay. So anyway, I guess I haven't really thought about what would be in agreement, but to the degree that we can express our values and hope to have it happen in the development in a way that works with Habitat for Humanity, an agreement could be a good thing, so. In general, I'm supportive. I was agnostic about this versus YWCA was a great applicant. I think that would have provided great value, but I think this serves a different need, but it's equally great, and so I'm happy that someone's willing to, I think we have good experience. And I would say I've been around long enough that I remember when the first Habitat for Humanity subdivision was proposed, there was a great deal of neighborhood concern there about the impact on property values and quality of life. And unless I missed something, those fears didn't really bear out on that part of town. And I think it's been a successful.
I can assure you, it's a very safe part of town.
Yeah,
I
so
live there.
I think that they have a track record of building and managing developments that address affordability without the feared negative consequences. So this would be a good thing.
I wanted to correct something. I believe it was the YWCA that included purchase.
Yeah.
They had the highest purchase, you were correct.
Yeah.
Crystal Homes had the next highest, and then Habitat was like, please give us the land. So there was.
But this is where, you know, to the degree that this is we're offering them a great in-kind value, that if there are other things like sustainability elements that we think they could do, a development agreement could
Yeah,
secure
you
those.
covered the things I was going to say. I was trying to space it out, so I didn't take all the time. I'm very disappointed we didn't get the YWCA. I love that. I hope we can bring it back at a new location in the future. But this is great. There hasn't been any trouble, as far as I know, with Habitat buildings, which we've had several. And I would love to use the Inflation Reduction Act options and other things that are available under this administration to make them solar or do geothermal, whatever we can do to live our values climate-wise. That would be fantastic. But otherwise, I'm all for this. This is fantastic.
And we can't highlight enough, I believe it was your words that said that this is like a once-in-a-generation, maybe it's a lifetime opportunity because of ARPA funding, and we're using it to like have the most impact. And my main concern is we bought that land and we control it, and we're gonna do what the city has told us is the important thing to do, and I do not wanna let go of it, you know, so we're not gonna get ARPA funds, and, you know, hopefully that we won't have another pandemic, I'll allow that to happen, but, you know, I don't want to squander this for future generations. I think that is so important for us to look forward on what will happen in the future. So, any other discussion?
I'll just add what I said before. I agree with that concern, but literally what we were talking about in terms of purchasing our own properties in the Housing Advisory Commission, modeling after Yellow Springs, was putting on leases that are similar to what they do with Habitat, in which it never goes away. It will always maintain affordability by definition.
Managed by somebody else.
Yeah,
Not
that we
us.
don't have to do.
All right, can we have a voice vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Move on to the second resolution.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to apply to the Ohio Department of Development Welcome Home Ohio Rehabilitation and Construction Program and work with Habitat for Humanity of Greater Cincinnati to apply for up to $1,200,000 in construction funds for the proposed housing project at 601, 603, and 607 West Chestnut Street.
Do you have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Jessica?
So this pairs with the first resolution. I did attend a webinar from the Ohio Department of Development Welcome Home Rehabilitation Program, what they call the WHO program. And it felt like it was written for Habitat for Humanity. This program is structured for home ownership at 80% area median income. It is for long-term affordability, like it's built into the grant program. It requires homeowner education of like financial literacy and things like that. And I was like, wow, this is a really good fit. In the way, what we intend to do is we intend to apply, you can apply for up to $30,000 per unit to help with construction cost. And so I had a conference call with Habitat for Humanity, and if approved, we would probably apply together as partners and see how much we can get and put towards their project.
Any public comments? Seeing none, council discussion?
I thought of something. In terms of making the most out of this limited opportunity, it would be great if we can get a commitment to maximize the density, because you said they might have a range between the 30 and the 38s.
Well, that's going to be our restrictions, not theirs. They want to do 38, but we have to,
Okay.
it has to go through the plan development process, and there's stormwater and, you know, all this kind of stuff that we're going to have to figure out.
Gotcha. I was making sure it wasn't a funding issue, and I would have loved a commitment to that, especially if we're going to put utility funds towards their way.
Well, I guess I would also say, though, that we're talking about density that's premised on a rezoning that we haven't yet approved. And so I understand why we're doing this all in the same meeting and resolutions come before ordinances. In a different world, you'd first settle on the zoning before we were identifying numbers of units, because you know, in order to maintain the fact that our process is not predetermined. So anyway, that's just a little comment. The zoning ideally would come first, but we're trying to be expeditious, so.
Is there a timeline on this?
The grant, so the reason we're coming here, Mr. Councilor Prithridge, is it's due February 5th.
Yeah.
And so that's why we're here tonight. And it's a rolling application. So that first batch is due February 5th. And then they'll see how many applicants they get. And then they'll do their awards. And then after that, it just becomes a rolling fund until the funds are gone. But we want to be in the first batch.
Okay, can we have a voice vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Move on to the third resolution.
A resolution authorizing the release of a public improvement bond in the amount of $1,395,644.59 for the Owls Landing subdivision and acceptance of a new public improvement bond in the amount of $271,041.98, ensuring the completion of Owls Landing subdivision public improvements.
Do you have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Mike?
Good evening. Much of the infrastructure construction at Owls Landing has been completed and is acceptable to the city engineer. The project has met our standards and specifications, and we're requesting council release the original bond of approximately $1.4 million and accept a new bond in the stated amount of $271,000 and change. The water, wastewater, and stormwater facilities are complete. The Oaks Trail connection to the community park is complete. So really, just the remaining items will come with the housing, the planting of street trees and completion of sidewalks and things of that nature. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any public comments? Seeing none, council discussion?
Wow, it's something to watch a big-scale developer come in and move about 10 times as fast as any other developer has. I mean, usually it's years before we get to, or it usually doesn't go as fast as this.
There was a lot of iron on that site.
Yeah, they really
Work was done.
fast. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Move on to the fourth resolution.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to apply for a grant with the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency not to exceed $75,000 for equipment upgrades that will reduce potential groundwater contamination from road de-icing salt storage and application.
Do you have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Mike?
We're asking council's authorization to apply for this grant. We would use it to purchase equipment that would help us maximize our road de-icing efforts and minimize how much salt we actually use in the environment. So this can be done with calibrated equipment, mapping software to make sure we're making the most effective use of our trucks on our streets, salt storage building facilities, things of that nature. So since we're allowed to apply for up to $75,000, we need council's authorization. And it wasn't specifically stated. I believe this is a 100% grant with no matching funds, but it wasn't clearly stated, so we'll verify that with our application. I'd be glad to answer questions.
Any public comments? Seeing none, council discussion?
Yes, please. I have studies that show that there's increasing salinity in the vernal pools that hold the salamanders I studied. So I have a personal interest in saving them and this proposal.
So just a question, Mike, was a long list of things that are eligible, and the grant is $75,000, and the $75,000 could be used for any of those, because any number of those items in there could cost $75,000 or more. So do you have a sense of what we might use it for?
Number one would be some additional calibration equipment.
Okay.
If we're allowed, we have some maintenance needs on our salt storage building that's actually in the CIP, so coincidentally, if we're allowed to repair, we would probably use that and save some of our CIP funds for other purposes.
Yeah, the smart application, the smart application of the road salt would be really awesome, because in excess, it's, all right, so anyway, this is a good grant. Thank you for applying.
Yep, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And we'll move on our first ordinance. First reading of our first ordinance.
An ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city of Oxford, Ohio for approximately 3.33 acres of land located at 601, 603, and 607 West Chestnut Street from single-family, low-density residential district to single and two-family residential district.
Zach?
Good evening, councilors. So as Councilor Prithridge alluded to, this is the zoning process that ideally should have preceded the consideration of the developer for the land at 601 through 607 West Chestnut Street. We're working on getting the presentation going at the moment. So for the time being, I'll just go through verbally some of the details on the application. The applicant for this rezoning is the city itself. My director, Sam Perry, who I'm here representing tonight, had actually applied for this rezoning request. The city does own all three parcels, so it'd be 601, 603, and 607 West Chestnut. It's totaling a little over 3 acres in size. There's currently 3 single-family dwellings, 1 per property. And the current zoning classification on the property is R1A, single-family low-density residential district. And the proposal is to rezone to R2A, single and two-family residential district. And what this essentially enables, since it's shaping up to be a planned development consideration, this increases the density potential up to anywhere from 38 to 42 dwelling units. But of course, that will have to come through the separate planned development process in order to actually enable that to happen. So rezoning the property, this action alone will still essentially preserve the only permitted uses being single-family and two-family dwellings. In order to do anything above and beyond that, like with Habitat for Humanity, the proposal is talking about anywhere from 4 to 8 attached units in a sequence per building. So that would not be allowed by right if this property were to be rezoned. In order to do something like that would take the planned development approval. So here we go. All right. So I'll skip ahead here. And just a reminder, kind of the key steps in the development process. So step 1, acquisition. So that's essentially been completed. The city owns all 3 parcels. So step 2 would be the zoning designation, which of course this is the first reading here tonight to rezone the property. Step 3 would be the plan development process, and then step 4, proceeding to the building permit for construction. And here is a look at the site location. So here's the boundary, and then these are the internal divisions between the 3 parcels, so you can see the 3 dwelling units on those parcels. And then here's a look at the existing land use in the area, mostly single family. There are areas off to the west, of course, Charleston Drive and the Chestnut Village Apartments, which are multifamily in use. Here's a look at the current zoning classification. So in this light yellow color, this is the R1A district, so essentially matches to the subdivision off to the east. And Southern Knolls subdivision, which is to the south, is R2A. So essentially the proposal right here would be to designate it the exact same district as the Southern Knolls with R2A. And then this is a look at our comprehensive plan, which our planning commission observed when they made their recommendation. They are recommending approval of this rezoning request. And then these are the decision standards out of our zoning code. The zoning code stipulates that only one of these need to be met in order for rezoning to be granted. And so staff's findings on these was that A, was not applicable. C, staff didn't really feel that that criterion was met in any way. B was kind of back and forth depending on if you look to certain sections of the comp plan. Some sections supported the request, particularly the need for affordable housing. And D, we felt that there was support for that. And ultimately, the Planning Commission concluded that B and D both supported the request to rezone the property to R2A. So by a vote of 4-1, the Planning Commission did recommend approval of this request at their December 12th hearing, which was well attended. We had 16 members of the public that got up and provided, voiced various comments and concerns. So it was a big decision that night, but ultimately the Planning Commission did decide to recommend approval of this request. Happy to take any questions from the board.
Do we have any public comments? Seeing none, council discussion?
So just to confirm, we're really early in the process that if our eventual applicant is Habitat for Humanity, they've got to go through a full planning process, 2 meetings with the Planning Commission, and then two more meetings with council before this
Correct,
moves forward.
correct.
So, all right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just on the substance of this, ideally, I think what you do with zoning is you would view it in the abstract, which is our goals in the abstract, this location in the abstract, what should the zoning be? And I think that for a variety of reasons, our comprehensive plan makes clear that the low-density R1 zoning doesn't really meet all of the things we're trying to do in this community. I mean, low-density, single-family, large lot residential is great in a low-density, auto-oriented suburban environment, but in the heart of the community on a key corridor, it doesn't address the kind of the efficiency infill needs that we could put this development on the outside of town in a cornfield, but instead we're redeveloping, we're doing infill, which is a value that our comprehensive plan has. The walkability of this, density promotes walkability, density promotes affordability, and I think that the Charleston Drive kind of showed, I mean, this was, I think, really wise, and I'm not sure, I guess it was Mr. Perry or your recommendation. R3 would have been a legitimate request to rezone this too. And I'm a density guy, and I think that R3 would have been, but we kind of heard from the public that I think the scale of apartment buildings is too much for people, but those people worried about apartment buildings live in townhome scale density housing. So I think it strikes a reasonable balance there that I think will fit the character of the neighborhood. So I guess I'm saying that even if there weren't Habitat for Humanity, even if the city weren't the owner, if you were just going to look at the map and say what the zoning should be, R1A is not the right zoning, and I think R2A is much better zoning, and that's why I supported this on the Planning Commission, and why I think the majority of the Planning Commissioners, I think there were some people concerned about the process, and I think that's what the one negative vote was about, was a little bit about the concern about the city being the applicant and that kind of stuff. So,
Okay. This is just the first reading, so we'll move on to the second first reading.
An ordinance levying upon the lots and lands enumerated in the list of estimated assessments, the amounts set forth on such list, and setting forth terms for payment of assessments.
Mike?
Good evening again. This is the fourth and final piece of legislation needed for the curb gutter and sidewalk special assessment program for 2023. Council's already approved a resolution of necessity. They've approved a construction contract to have the work completed. And they've approved a resolution defining the total costs per parcel for the projects. So this is the fourth and final step of the process. A homeowner will have up to 30 days to pay cash following approval of the ordinance. If they choose not to do that, we will certify the taxes to Butler County, and they'll have 5 annual installments at 5% interest to pay back the city for the costs involved in the project. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any public comments? You got a taker.
I see. Ann Fuhr, I live on Dana Drive in Southern Knowles. I think the city is the taker in this case. I've only lived in the city 3 years, so I haven't heard the specifics of this before, but I found myself going through the agenda, looking at the addresses that were being assessed for this year. Is there any way of finding out the schedule so that a homeowner has some warning about when this assessment is going to be occurring? That's my question.
So generally, we try to do these improvements with, in conjunction with the city's street resurfacing program. So those streets that we intend to resurface in 2024, there will be a resolution of necessity at the next council meeting, and that will provide notice to homeowners that work is intended in the area. So that will be at the first meeting in February. I would like to reiterate, though, that a property owner's responsibility is to maintain their property, curb, gutter, and sidewalk included. It's not necessarily the city's obligation to tell you to maintain your property. That's your responsibility. This is being done specifically so work is completed, and it gives our streets longer longevity and provides a safer environment for cyclists and pedestrians so that we don't have trip hazards and such in the community.
If I could just add, it's, to Ann's question, this is a long process, and as Mike said, we're having a list of streets that we plan to do this year, and so this notice will go out to the homeowners about what needs to be repaired, and then, they can go out and get their own estimate and compare that against our figures that we send. So there's several steps, and what you're voting on tonight was the very last step of something that occurred with street improvements that were done last summer.
Yeah, we sent out well over 100 notices in the 2023 program. Many property owners did the work on their own, at their own cost, and did not involve the city. I believe we had 37 that chose to not do the work and have the city do the work for them at our cost. So you may or may not be able to get the work done more inexpensively if you do the work yourself, but likely you could, because we have to follow prevailing wages and other procurement rules that private property owners do not have to follow.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, council discussion?
Can I just follow up with a question, just to clarify the timeline, that you're making the determination on which streets will be paved, and that's a decision that has a lot of variables in there about the condition of the pavement and so forth. And so, but the timeline for the homeowner is they'll get a note, for the people who are going to have to replace their curb and gutter in the summer of 2024, because typically the paving's happening in August or something, right? They're gonna get notified when that work would need to be completed by that time?
After council approves a resolution of necessity, we will send a notice by certified mail. The Ohio Revised Code requires 45 days notice. That's a short period, especially in the winter time, so we understand that. We'll generally give a deadline, typically around the end of April or early May. Our goal is to have all the work completed so that when our paving program begins, that they're not impeded. But we need enough time to give the homeowner enough time to get the work done. But if they choose not to, we need enough time to hire a contractor and get the work done ourselves before the paving crew comes in. So it's tighter than you might expect.
No, I mean, so, yeah, I mean, this is, we're finishing up this one round from the last time. I mean, I guess I would say that I understand your theory on this, Mike, about by Ohio law, the responsibility in the curb and gutter, but I do think that for the average person to find out in May that, or in April, that that they might have to make an improvement. If you look at what some of these assessments are, they can be $3,000, $5,000, $8,000, $12,000. And so to many people, even a few, it's, the process is, I think, I understand why we do it the way we do, but I think it can breed shock and awe in people. And I think that to the degree that we can, I mean, it seems to me that based on the condition of the pavement, we may, whether we did like unofficial pre-notifications that your property is likely to be paved within the next 5 years, the current replacement cost is this amount per linear foot, please anticipate that. Maybe that's an impossibility, but I just think that, I think there's a way that we could do this that would breed less public discontent with the way it goes. I understand your theory that as a homeowner, I should be looking out at my curb and saying, oh, it's starting to crumble, I should replace that. But I think most people logically see the curb as an extension of the street, and they don't see it their responsibility until they get the certified letter that tells them they have to pay $8,000. So anyway, that's just I continue to believe our process could be a bit better from the public relations point of view.
So we're enforcing the ordinance as written. If council desires to change the ordinance, this program is not a headache for homeowners, it's a headache for staff as well. We spend a tremendous amount of time marking curb, sending letters, corresponding, hiring contractors, inspecting. Some other communities, they add these costs into construction contracts with the paving program, and the ratepayers pay for those projects. So that's not how prior councils have chosen to do it here, and we're following the ordinance and Ohio Revised Code.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't, if that's the way we've done it, at some point, I think that a work session to discuss, this is how we do it, this is the way we've done it, these are some ways that other cities do it, and we may come back to doing it exactly the same way that we've done, which is assessing the homeowner and then asking to get a permit to pay for a permit to do the work that they were told to do. Like, maybe we'd settle back on it, but I just know from having been on the receiving end of it and seeing the reactions that my neighbors pose, I wonder if there's not a way that could be modified to be a little bit better, and maybe it was worth discussing in a work session.
Well, I might add that they have, if we assess them, they have, I believe, 5 years to pay it back, and our interest rate is
5%.
5%. So, we do give them time. Many homeowners go ahead and do it. And, I fear that if we were to change it, we've been doing it this way for a long time. That doesn't mean we have to continue, but, you might hear from those that were assessed in the past that they want a refund or whatever. So it's touching. I know a lot of the communities, we do very well here as far as sidewalks. There's very few neighborhoods that do not have sidewalks. a lot of the communities that I visit, their sidewalks aren't as extensive as ours are, but, we believe in making it a walkable community. So, it is a burden for the homeowner when this project comes up, but we're following the Ohio Revised Code and our past policy, but we can certainly, discuss it with city council and review things.
I have a question. If somebody sells their property during the 5-year period where they're supposed to pay it back, is the responsibility with the homeowner? Is it with the property? How does that get?
Well, hopefully in the title search it comes up, but I would think that a responsible seller would inform the buyer through the realtor that, yes, I have 1 or 2 years left or whatever on my special assessment. But we've had that issue in the past where someone's purchased a property and was not informed of the assessment, but it goes with the new property owner. And, if they can handle it through a closing where it's part of the sales, where they pay the rest of it to the new homeowner or whatever, but it goes with the property.
Can I also ask a question? So if we're notifying folks and then we want them to get it done by April or May, let's say I'm a homeowner and I'm doing it myself and I can't get the construction crew there until July or August, or I want to do it myself and I need a couple more months to be able to save up to pay a contractor, and they show really good faith. Without opening a giant can of worms, how flexible are we if we say, I would really like it by April, but if you're going to show us that you have a contract, you can do it in August?
I understand your point. We're already being flexible by, the Ohio Revised Code calls for 45 days notice. So we understand we're making notice in winter. It's hard to do some work in winter. The end of next week, it's going to be in the mid-60s, believe it or not. So work can still be done. But we will be flexible. The critical point for the city is we need enough time to advertise a project, come to council, award a contract, and have enough time for the contractor to do the work before the paving contractor comes in. And we tried to get that work done by mid-August at the very latest so that we're not impeding move-in at Miami for the fall semester. So it's a critical timeline to keep, or new problems develop that we're not accustomed to.
Okay, thank you.
Everything you've said is factual, and you're right about responsibility and everything else, but I've also heard the complaints, and I agree with everything David said. I also would recommend a work session, but also I would love to hear in that work session your thoughts on areas that this could be improved, which we can't address here, but maybe we could some other time.
Sure, we'd be glad to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we can move on to our first reading.
An ordinance amending ordinance number 3750, supplemental budget ordinance number 1, to make supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2024.
Heidi?
Good evening, Vice Mayor and councilors. So unfortunately, I always get to bring the bad stuff. This increase in appropriation is necessary to ensure funding for the 2024 health insurance plan and contracts that we currently have in place. This first year is a transition year. With our fixed contract with the Jefferson Health Plan, the expected claims paid monthly to Jefferson are based on our experience in the prior year. We all know that we had some pretty significant claims last year. Therefore, the higher claim expectations are projected. So with the new prescription programs we've implemented, we are hopeful that our claims costs will decrease in 2024, which will then also reduce the fixed expected claims cost for 2025. So during this transition year, it's a fixed amount based on prior year's claims, but we're hopeful that 2024's claims are going to be less. So then 2025, we will not have quite as much going on. But the increase presented will bring the $1,275 monthly employer contribution to $1,615 per employee per month, which is an increase of about $340 per month.
Any public comments? Seeing none, council discussion? All right, we'll move on to our second readings of our ordinances.
An ordinance limiting the number of non-medical cannabis dispensary license to 2 in the city of Oxford and designating the location for these 2 non-medical cannabis dispensaries.
Do you have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Doug?
Yes, so this proposed ordinance limits the number of non-medical cannabis dispensaries in Oxford to 2 and states that the locations will be at the current existing medical marijuana dispensaries. As you know, under the initiated statute, medical marijuana facilities will receive a non-medical marijuana dispensary license. So both locations have expressed an interest in recreational cannabis dispensary license, and if either business chooses not to accept the non-medical marijuana dispensary license, then city council can determine another location outside the Uptown Business District.
Any public comments? I hear deep sighing. Sounds good.
He looks familiar.
Glenn Ellerby, 158 Silverleaf Drive. You guys know that I don't like to say a whole lot of things, and I especially don't come to a meeting to talk about a bunch of different things. But I have an observation, some criticisms, and a solution. The observation is, I agree with what you're trying to do, and I believe the spirit of it is control. Controlling the outcome of an unprecedented event. And the execution of this is, in my opinion, very heavy-handed, is open to some liability, and there are opportunities to do this in a slightly different way that could create tremendous opportunities to solve a lot of problems. So, if the way I see this ordinance as written passes, you essentially have legislated an oligopoly in town. And the 2 facilities that we have right now had to earn their way through the state to get the licenses they have. If you legislate that, other individuals may want to test you in a legal capacity possibly as to why you chose them as opposed to anybody else. So I just wanted to get that out of the way, because that to me was one of the biggest glaring things that I saw in the particular ordinance as it's written. So the other thing that I was looking at is, and even stated earlier today in this meeting, this is an unprecedented opportunity. It is an unprecedented opportunity for economic development, as well as the furthering of both infrastructure and social programs in Oxford if handled in a slightly different way. The reason why I say this is there are a lot of unintended consequences handling it in the fashion that is presented right now. It is limited to 2 places that we already have that have very limited social constructs around it. But if we treat this in a slightly different fashion, once again, we can provide a lot of opportunities for a great many citizens in Oxford. Let me give you an example. We have a relatively large senior community. A lot of those seniors take various medications that could be solved by other therapeutics that happen to fall under the cannabis umbrella. Now, I'm not an herbal enthusiast, but I see an economic opportunity, and I like to talk about it. So one of the things that would happen is McCullough Hyde, the Knolls, pretty much any other medical facility would not be able to use or sell therapeutics if it's passed in the way that it's written currently, the way I see it. Now, I could go on about different things, about different scenarios, but I want to get to the proposal that I have of the slight change. I believe that if you provided a permit program as well as a tax, then the city of Oxford can, I would say, benefit tremendously by these particular ways. So if you create a permit program, everything that you guys are talking about right now stays exactly the same. You can say, by default, our current facilities will just get a permit. Any other facility that wants to apply for a permit, now has to explain why they need it, what they're going to do with it, and how it's going to affect our community. And it can actually come to council for the vote, similar to the clause at the end of this thing that says if one of the other two gave theirs up, then council can see about giving that particular permit to somebody else. Why not just create the permit program? That way, everybody gets a shot, you all can evaluate it how you feel like it, and there's no discriminatory narrative. The second thing is, Oxford couldn't create a tax. It would have to go up for a vote for the public, but I believe that everybody in this room knows that in Butler County, they basically handed Oxford a golden ticket. So I believe it's us and 7 Mile. They're the only 2 municipalities that haven't outright banned it. And if we're one of them, then we're going to see a tremendous amount of people coming in. Therefore, if we end up taxing this, then we're going to get, I'm just going to be conservative and say a reasonable amount of funds to accomplish all
Thank you,
kinds of
Glenn.
things. Excuse me?
Thank you. It's been 5 minutes.
Oh, all right. Well, my final statement is, because I didn't see the thing up here, please.
You got a 1-minute warning. Thank you, Glenn.
All right.
Appreciate your comment. Any other public comments? Seeing none, council discussion?
Well, you know, I don't want to, Glenn left, but basically, the only thing that I believe that we can do is either limit the number or prohibit it. And as Glenn pointed out, the other cities in Butler County, I believe all of them have passed a moratorium on it. As far as the tax goes, the tax is in the state-initiated statute, so we can't add another tax. Now, is this the final law, the initiated statute? As you know, in reading the newspaper, either the Senate or the House have introduced a number of bills. They haven't gotten anywhere. And I think it's the Senate, because the House has said we're going to take our time. And so these bills that they're considering is to change how that tax is distributed. As it currently exists, it's a 10% tax on adult use consumers, of which 36% goes to the host community. So we can't up that tax, and we can't change it, but one of the bills is talking about distributing it differently. Also, one of the bills is talking about limiting the potency of it, and another bill is talking about how many plants you can have. It currently is 6 for an individual and 12 for a household. But I wanted to come on record that we are open to the idea of recreational dispensaries, and following council's lead with the vape shops and how we don't want more of those, I thought we should probably limit it. And since the medical marijuana dispensaries that we currently have are entitled to a recreational dispensary license, it made sense to me. Now, if we want to up it later on, that's fine. But, you know, who knows how this bill or the final version of the law will turn out, because the Division of Cannabis in the Department of Commerce has, I believe, 6 or 7 months to come up with the regulations. And so they're planning to do that. The governor has proposed, let's go ahead and let the medical marijuana dispensaries distribute recreational. But, you know, so yes, did we create an oligopoly? Yeah, but we didn't create a moratorium. So, you know, there's not a perfect answer here, but I thought this deserves some consideration. So anyway, thank you.
I'll also say, I think last meeting, this conversation very much reflected a let's dip our toes in the water for a year, for however long, while the legislation settles and we get a lay of the land of what this is ultimately going to look like in Oxford. Are we going to get a bunch of people from out of town coming in to buy? What does that look like? We can set it at 2 for now, and we can revisit later. So just a little refresher that we did acknowledge that last time, that we were limiting it, and we see it as a first step, not an only step.
Yeah, you can sort of go one way and not the other, right? If we just let it happen and they all come in and there is a problem, it's very hard to draw it back. But if we start with 2 and then consider how it goes and expand from there, we're okay. We can get what we need. My question is, which I think Glenn sort of alluded to, is there a benefit of going forward with limiting dispensaries to a combined medical and recreational, if that's even possible? Because medical probably has greater standards around it, I would assume.
Wait, what, I'm sorry, what's your question again?
Would there be a benefit going forward if we were to increase it from 2 of mandating that it both allow for medical and recreational use? I assume there's greater regulation and standards.
Well, I don't know, because I haven't seen the regulations for recreational, but, you know, the state now issues licenses for medical, and they've only permitted 2. I believe we had maybe a third applicant, but either they didn't follow through with the process or what, but, you know.
But it would be very weird to maintain that if recreational is available everywhere, right? So I assume
Yeah.
that's going to change.
Well, and.
Just something to think about.
One of the, shall we say, rumors that we heard were that a lot of these vape shops were planning on being able to sell or recreational marijuana, and, you know, that's not gonna be the case if we only allow it at these 2 locations, so. But that's up to council. I'm recommending 2 right now. We can change that number, however you see fit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the descriptor that I would use is this is kind of a stopgap measure. Other people are taking a stopgap measure of a moratorium. It's like a knee-jerk response. And I think typically a moratorium in planning speak is always of a limited duration. You're doing it so that you can develop a more reasoned policy over time. It's not a ban per se. And so I view this as a little bit like that like, I don't know what a time frame would be, but I would like to see a permitting program that is some number greater than 2, but not some unlimited number, and take a few years to, I think other people will innovate with the policy and we can adopt them, but I'd like within the next 2 years to come back and see something that wasn't just limited to those 2 incumbents. But I think the first step is to close the door and then open it up a crack later.
Agreed, and it would be good to have some control over location potentially.
Yeah, all those same things what we did with the tobacco stuff, we learned a lot through that. But I think we want to do this carefully, so, okay.
And I want to commend us as a city, I'm assuming how this will go with our vote, that we are obeying the will of the people.
Yeah.
And it is refreshing. You know, I didn't think that was something we'd have to think about. I thought it was a given, but, and I also really appreciate this approach because, a drug is a drug is a drug, and some drugs are better than others, yes, but there is so much history behind. Alcohol used to be considered medicinal, right? And then like nicotine and tobacco isn't as bad as we know about it now, and so more and more information will come out about marijuana as you're allowed to legally study it, and it just makes so much sense to be controlled about this, but still be open to the fact that market changes, and we're going to be flexible to that, and especially flexible to the will of the people.
Glenn's not wrong. We have a whole state that doesn't permit recreational marijuana like 4 miles from here. And so there is economic development potential, just as we saw in Michigan, served vast volumes of Ohio business, I'm sure. And so Oxford, yeah, there is
Yeah, and if we.
economic development potential there if you want it.
Yeah, you know, and if this tax stays in place where we get, 36% of the 10%, we'll get some idea of how much of that so-called economic development is coming to Oxford. But, you know, to add to Chantel's point, a majority of Ohio voters, 57% approved it, but here in Oxford, it was approved by over 68% of the voters, so, you know.
So in the sense that we are going to review this in the future and maybe expand it, we might want to consider getting some metrics on, are we meeting demand? If that's actually an issue, if there's not enough, and if prices skyrocket because they have the ability to do so because of excessive demand. So let's get back to that if we reconsider.
All right. Okay, so can we have a roll call?
Mr. Bracken?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Ms. French?
Yes.
Mr. Prethridge?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ragu?
Yes. We'll move on to the second reading.
An ordinance to amend ordinance number 3689, regulating the rates and charges to be charged and collected and the services to be rendered by Glenwood Energy of Oxford Incorporated, its successors and assigns, for gas and gas service furnished to all of its customers within the corporate limits of the city of Oxford during the period ending October 31st, 2025, by authorizing Glenwood Energy of Oxford Incorporated to add a city border station upgrade rider.
Do you have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second?
And Doug?
Yes. So Glenwood Energy is planning to upgrade their city border station, which is located on US 27 South, and they're seeking a special rider to recover these costs. The rider is based on a 3-year average annual throughput of gas of 382,494 MCF. The proposed 2-year special rider is 29.42 cents per MCF. And Glenwood Energy will provide us semi-annual updates and true up with this new rider. What that means is basically after they recover their full costs, then the rider will be taken off. So once again, this legislation for this 2-year special rider would amend our existing ordinance, which sets the rates with Glenwood Energy, which is ordinance number 3689. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Any public comments? Seeing none, council discussion?
I can just reiterate what was said last time, that they basically have a right to this by law, and we could challenge it, but we would almost certainly lose that challenge. And so this might not be our preference, but it's sort of what we need to do, just so the public knows the situation.
Yeah, and I guess in the even bigger framework, I think in the great scheme of things, I wish we weren't reinvesting, improving our fossil fuel infrastructure. But their system exists for that. I mean, use utility is a natural gas utility. They've got ways to pay for the improvements. I hope over time we can develop something similar in the city to support renewable energy development, because this is a fuel of the past, not of the future. But there's a rate structure, and it's kind of a foregone conclusion that I think we have to approve it.
Yep, that's why I gave my, so the public knows where we stand. We're not doing this by choice.
Give a roll call.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Ms. French?
Yes.
Mr. Bracken?
Yes.
Mr. Prethridge?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ragu?
Yes. Move on to announcements and communications. Doug?
Yep. Thank you. Just a couple of things. One thing that I wanted to point out, that in the Department of Finance, they were notified that received an award for our annual comprehensive financial report for the year ending December 31st, 2022. And so this has been awarded by the the Governmental Finance Officers Association. It's their Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. And this is our 39th year to receive this award. It's the highest form of recognition in the area of governmental accounting and financial reporting, and it represents a significant accomplishment by government and its management. So I want to congratulate Heidi and her staff for achieving this again. I think it's a very important report. I refer to it all the time. It can be found on our website and in the finance department section. We have I don't know how far back we have them there, but you can find it once again on our website. Just to give you an example of one of the items you can find in the statistical section is you can see who the 10 highest paid, or 10 highest income tax entities are. For example, Miami University pays like 49% of our income tax, the employees there. So we have a lot of useful information in there besides just the financial reports for the general fund and the other funds. So congratulations to Heidi on that and her staff. And the last thing I just want to share with you is we did meet with Duke Energy, one of our other utilities, last week, and the topic of discussion was the upgrade to the Spring and Locust Street substation. and other transmission and distribution line work that's going to be occurring in the city to basically make our service more reliable. And so we're happy to hear about those improvements. And that's all I have for you this evening. Thank you.
All right, Mike.
Good evening again. Just a few slides to update council and the public on some of our projects. Glenn, can you click share? Thank you. Council's approved a design contract for water softening at the plant. One of the requirements for that is to run a pilot plant for 2,000 hours. So this is our pilot plant here. Not a great picture, but you can see the membrane cartridges that run on the back side of the plant. We'll run this for 2,000 hours and get all of the design data that we need for how our raw water impacts the membranes that we're using. That information will be used for the final design of the full plant itself. So that's moving along. We need to collect about 2 more months of data, and we'll further the design at that time. I just wanted to update you on the various phases of the Oaks Trail. Phase 3, Segment A was completed, and I bring that up because of Three Valley Conservation Trust has built a very nice scenic overlook and boardwalk. It's close to the Leonard Howe Trailhead. So if you haven't seen that yet, they did a fantastic job. It's really nice to, it's wheelchair friendly, and you can get all the way out to over 4 Mile Creek. So congratulations to them. They funded that themselves. The city did not pay a nickel for that project. Additionally, we have Segment B from Peffer Park to the high school. We had hoped to have this paved by now. We do not. Everything is done. It's graded. All the culverts are in. The cement stabilization is done. The rock is done. So everything is done. It's ready for asphalt. So as soon as the plants reopen in March, weather permitting, that segment will be paved and completed. Segment 4 will go from the middle school to Al's Landing and into the community park and aquatic center. So we have to clear the right-of-way for that project. So a lot of the tree removal, shrub removal is complete. So we're ahead of schedule in that regard. And we have firm deadlines. You have to beat the Indiana bat deadline in March, or you are not allowed to take down habitat after that date. So we expect Segment 4 to be completed this construction season as well. There is a question on Segment 4 that we've discussed, the safety of the Dana Drive crossing. So a full traffic signal here is not warranted by engineering study. So council added $75,000 to our appropriation for 2024 to enhance safety at this crossing. Working with Bear Becker, our design engineer, we have come up with this extension of curb and gutter to clearly define the radii of the Dana Drive. There is an extension of the culverts under Dana Drive with extension of the sidewalk to move it away from the cross street. And we have a refuge island built into the center line of State Route 732. So we still will have rapid flash beacons here. A pedestrian or biker can walk across and get refuge at the middle of the island and have an area of safety should a vehicle not respect a flashing beacon. It's not the same as a full signal. Cars run red lights all the time as well, so just because there's a red light there is not an assurance of safety. We would supplement this with direct overhead lighting of new street lighting directly over the crossing, which is not there now. We would have highly reflective street markings and signage, including the shark teeth markings here to indicate pedestrians crossing at this area. So this can be done within the budget that council discussed. So I wanted to update you on our thoughts on that. We've already contracted for this phase of the project, so we'll do a change order. That's our intention. And this is the type of product that we will get with that. And we also had public comments on Phase 5, which is connecting the high school going over the railroad and eventually over to the middle school. There's been some concern from the residents at Silverleaf and Gardenia about the path going through their front yards. We've been evaluating options with Phase 5. And this yellow line was it's labeled the preferred route. That was from what was presented to the public. And you can see it coming up from Collins Run and going along Silverleaf in the street right-of-way. And this is relatively steep here, which is not ideal. But it is going through some front yards, which is not ideal. We heard a lot of comment about that. We've been discussing if we can make this orange path a reality. Aesthetically, it's much more pleasing. This is through a wooded area with water features. You would spend a fair amount of time down by Collins Creek, Collins Run. To do this will cost some money, though. We will have about $75,000 extra in construction costs, and we'll have some other design costs. Because we're using federal money, we'll have some environmental costs, and there'll also be a lot of bat habitat through here, so we'll have to be concerned with some of the deadlines with bat habitat mitigation and the fees that are associated with that. So while it is more aesthetically pleasing, ultimately I think will be a more pleasurable experience for everyone, it's going to cost a little bit of money. So those are our thoughts. Jessica's already procured $2.76 million for this phase of the project, which is fantastic, and I'm sure she's looking for more. But it's an expensive segment. It's about $5 million for this segment. So I wanted to update council on our progress there and make sure that we're on the right path. No pun intended.
You can use the pun.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. That's great. JJ? Nothing? Heidi?
Just very quickly, we were notified by Regional Income Tax Agency that there were 2,222 non-filer letters that were mailed out today. So if anybody's asking about these letters that they've received, whether they're legitimate, they are. These are for residents that have not filed in the past. They're on the letter, they can fax, mail, or e-file if they haven't done the filing, or they could just fax or mail the documents that are being requested. So just an update.
John? Nothing? Casey? Zach?
Yes, hello again, council. So just wanted to respond to a question that you posed at a previous meeting, Vice Mayor Ragu, about contact information for landlords for rental properties. So I've just been working on putting together a new report that shows all of our rental properties, so having essentially one record per property along with contact information, so the name of the responsible party or managing company for each unit, email, phone, that type of thing, along with the status of each unit. So I'm just going through that report right now just to make sure that there's enough QA/QC with that, make sure that the statuses are correct. So that's what's holding up my response. But if you need that contact information sooner, I'm able to export that to Excel and pass that along.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jessica? Heather?
Nothing, thank you.
Chris?
Council, my comments will be a little longer tonight. So I want to address the fact that there weren't any public comments tonight regarding the incident that occurred in November. I don't think is an indication that there's a lack of interest apathy or anything else from the city. I think that the citizens, I think it's a reflection of, one, I'd like to think that the press releases that the city has issued have explained where we are in a process, and that there's been a great deal of thought and care and discussion given to how to deal with this situation, and a recognition that there's going to continue to be significant community dialogue. So I want to take the opportunity to talk about what's happened and what the future is going to hold. My office has handled somewhere between 15 to 20 public records requests, not just locally but nationally. We've had to edit videos to produce them, produce other documentary evidence. We're governed by Ohio Sunshine Law, and because there's an ongoing matter in the criminal court system, that limits what we can produce. When that case is closed, there will be more information that can be produced legally at that time. I think everyone knows that there was a review by the the Butler County Prosecutor's Office that determined that there was no basis to find a probable cause. That is the legal process that has to be followed under the laws of the state of Ohio. The local county prosecutor is the agency that reviews matters like this when referred, and that was done. During the pendency of that review, it would have been inappropriate for Chief Jones to initiate a disciplinary investigation. That doesn't mean that discipline will be issued. It doesn't mean that discipline won't be issued. It's a process that has to be followed, and it needs to be done in a thoughtful way. Now that the prosecutor's review is complete, that process will begin. We discussed the various options that were available. We discussed whether or not typically it would be done as an internal, meaning done by the Oxford City Police Department, but we felt that that was not appropriate given what we perceive and believe to be the degree of community concerns regarding the incident. We then discussed taking it to an outside agency, which typically would be another law enforcement agency. We felt that that would be perceived, whether actual or not, but certainly be perceived as having potential bias behind it. So the recommendation that is being made and the approach that the city manager is going to take is that we're going to retain an outside lawyers to do a review that will review both the incident itself as to whether or not there were any policies of the Oxford use of force policies. Also review the procedural dysfunction, I will say, that led to the fact that the chief didn't have all of the information presented to him when making a determination on whether or not the use of force was appropriate under the circumstances. That is really a separate and distinct piece of it, but that's another part that the city needs to address because that goes to the community's trust and process. We estimate that this will take about 30 days, and I expect that there will be some recommendations made, not related necessarily to discipline. That has to play out. But when I say recommendations made, because this is clearly a matter of why the Police Committee, Community Relations and Review Commission was created. And I think that there will be discussions. I'd be shocked if there weren't. And some of the things that will come out of that report, I'm sure, will be discussed in the context of that process. So I'm going to ask the community and those who are concerned to understand that we are aware of the importance of this. We're aware of that many stakeholders within the community are vested in this process and making sure that it's transparent. And we intend to fulfill that mission and to do what we can to restore community faith in not only the staff but the police department as well, who I think strives at all times to professionally and ethically engage in its mission to protect and serve the citizens of Oxford. But there are questions about that right now, and we've got to address them.
Mike?
All right. Nothing tonight, thanks.
Alex?
I have a few things. One, congratulations to Heidi and your team. That's really awesome. Two, the next Oxford Area Solutions for Homelessness meeting is going to be Monday, January 22nd at the Seminary Building on the corner of Church and Poplar. This month will feature Jessica Green, as well as some other exciting stuff, so hope to see you there. Third, I was lucky enough for the second year in a row to be a baking contest judge at the Chocolate Meltdown, and it is one of my favorite things about being an elected official. So if you haven't had the opportunity to check out the Chocolate Meltdown at the Oxford Community Arts Center, definitely go see it next year. Enter a baked good into a baking competition. Turns out I'm a very nice judge. If it's chocolate, I'm generally easy to please. And thank you to our local businesses for participating. The list was really long of folks who are offering specialty drinks or treats or sales or things like that. So shout out to the city staff and OCAC for putting on a stellar event. Hopefully I did well as a judge because I really want to be invited back next year. And then I just wanted to take a second to say that I think in light of, we've been having a lot of conversations lately that have taken a lot of consideration of community trust, is I think how I'll put it. The police video incident that happened, having conversations about where to put affordable housing, having conversations around where to put a trail. I don't think any of us take lightly that you all put your trust in us as leaders in the community, and we take that role really seriously. So we appreciate when folks come forward and express their concerns to us. And even if it doesn't feel like we're listening or it doesn't feel like we did what you wanted, we read every comment, we read every email, we listen. So if you've got something to say to us, please let us know, because we do take your trust really seriously, and we take being stewards of that trust really seriously. So I promise we are here, we are listening. Thank you.
Amber?
I want to echo what Councilor French said. Thank you for those comments, and appreciate the comments from our law director as well. And just to say thank you for the members of the community who've shared their concerns with me, either bumping into me in Kroger or reaching out to me. Understand that we do have a process that we need to follow to preserve the integrity of the process. The information that's going to come out will come out when we're able to release it. But I can tell that a lot of people are concerned, and also a lot of people care, and just want Oxford to be a place where everyone feels welcome and safe. And so, again, we are listening, we care, and I just want to encourage you to have faith in the process at this time.
Nothing for me tonight.
I just want to kind of add to what people have already said, and I really want to thank our administration because I think this is the video is difficult to watch. I think that kind of circumstance is hard to watch in any circumstance, but what's difficult is to try to gain information so we know what happened and why what happened. I appreciate that, while there's definitely a reaction one can have, there's also a way to view this, and I like the multi-tiered step, which is, one was a criminal investigation. Was there probable cause that a crime occurred? Next is the administrative review, and I really, I think it's so important just to communicate the importance that we really want this to be objective. I want it to be objective. I'm with the city of Oxford. I stand by the city of Oxford, but I want to know what happened, both in terms of that night, but also administratively the dysfunction, perhaps. So that's a two-step process. We've gone through one step already. The next step is going to take another 30 days. But I think it's important to note that there's likely going to be a third step, which is a deeper reflection on the way things like this get handled in general, whether by the police or whether it's by a bar or whatever, and the use of force, what's appropriate, what kind of training, and that's where I'm really, really glad. We were talking before about that we didn't have the PCRRC. We didn't have it before, but I think this is one of the times in which its value is going to be great, because I think there's going to be the process is going to shift from being legal criminal to kind of legal administrative to a little bit more community political, and because that rebuilding of trust and the dialogue and understanding the way policing happens is going to, I think it's going to keep us busy in 2024. So I want to, but it takes some patience to do that, and so I appreciate it from the public, but also everybody internally who I believe I get the sense wants to know what happened and what was the right thing that should have happened. So thank you to everybody involved.
Okay. As you can see, I'm very cold still. I never took my coat off, and I have a puffy vest underneath this and a sweater. And I can't even imagine not being inside and not having my home and my space heater to go home to. And as a tangential concern, because I think being unhoused is so obviously awful, there was a woman who is a new tenant at the mobile home park who did not have access to hot water for 3 weeks, the whole time she had been there. And that's crazy. How do you shower, right? Like you have to boil water, maybe splash it on yourself, with children involved nonetheless. So, and I'm so glad you're working on that, Zach, because I think that we have to hold these property owners accountable. That, okay, you have a manager, if they are not accessible, who is the follow-up person? Because saying that you are just not available for weeks is not appropriate, ethical. And as reaching out to, y'all know this, so mobile homes are considered manufactured homes, and the city does not, and correct me if I'm wrong, the city does not have any jurisdiction over those. We don't really have any ability because we do not have the ordinance or policy in play, which is a really big concern that we should be talking about at the city retreat coming up, the council retreat. And then going forward, it was, okay, then who does have jurisdiction? Calling the health department, they do not have jurisdiction. They said, well, it has to deal with water, call EPA. I knew that wasn't gonna work. Called them, they're like, no, but they tried to help. There's the Commerce Committee that may have jurisdiction, or they should have, and then the EPA gave me a number for the Manufactured Home Committee, was on hold with them for 5 minutes, and then I just hung up. And then just feeling pretty dejected, like, I do not know how to help you besides just letting you have my bathroom. Like, that is the only thing I can do. And feeling so helpless, and we just should not, like, we owe the people who live here, regardless of what socioeconomic status they're in, to not have slumlords in our jurisdiction. So I'm looking forward to figuring out what we can do so that there isn't nobody that is accountable, because I think we can do better. Okay, on that note, maybe we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
I think it's unofficial to get together.